Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and this week's guest is a really dynamic gentleman. His name is Bruce Koerber, and he has spent decades studying systems, especially economic ones, and how they might work in this new normal that we are all creating. He's written a book called The Divine Economy, and I recommend checking it out. It's free from his website, which will be in the description below. For now, put it on hold. We'll be right back. Yeah, we'll re-bite back. Easy for me to say. And hey, we all make mistakes, right? I'm not going to cut it. We'll be right back. So, Bruce, it is such a great time and place to have you with us, especially in the shift that's going on in our world now. I really appreciate your time. And we've been connected for, I think, several years on the internet. We just never met in person. And so I'm so glad to do that.
Well, it's wonderful being here, and I'm very excited to meet you and see all the good things you're doing.
Well, and you too. This is about, this reciprocation that we have in the world today of servant leadership and just trying to do the right things, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of the right things, most of the right things we've been involved with have been in the outer world. We don't share what's going on inside. So we're bereft of those kinds of conversations for the most part, usually because when we go there, others think we're a bit crazy or weird or insane, and they distance themselves very quickly. We want to change that because these things are very real and they're probably more consistent than the outer world experience. We just don't share it. So saying that, how did you first begin? Because I know with your work and the diligence and determination and devotion that you've had to it, that you've had to have had an early start in seeing these connections and what might be available internally that connects in the outer world. What was that like, and when did it begin?
Well, I don't think it began until I was in my youth, and my grandmother, I consider her my spiritual mother. She was from a Catholic background originally, and then she converted to Unity, which is a kind of non-denominational thing. And she
Hmm.
would talk when I would see her and have time alone with her. She would talk about the Eastern thought, all the masters and the universal mind. And so that kind of broadened my view of the world. But as an individual, as a young person, I think where I really started to connect was I would go for walks. We lived near a public golf course, and I would just go for long walks, and I would take along a stick, and that stick was like a staff. And for some reason, walking with that staff and just contemplating that connection kind of made me aware of this inner self that I had.
Sure. It didn't have Wilson stamped on it, did it?
No.
Wilson, the reason Wilson Staff is a brand of golf clubs, being a golfer.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
No, it was just a random stick. I think I had a favorite once I found a good one. But then the other thing, about that same period, what was happening is I would look for a solitary place, and I would smoke this high quality reefer and just get in touch with, experience different sensations of hearing and seeing. And those two combined together at that stage in my life when I was also being influenced by what my grandmother was saying. I
Hmm.
think all those things together kind of made me realize I was a spiritual being, that really I had more deep, um, inner thoughts and potency and
Sure. Well,
potential.
and smoking the pot gave you a chance. I think we need to be open about this. This is something that isn't a deterrent to consciousness. It's actually an accelerant because it takes the ego out of it so that you can be more self-examining without the tension or sometimes I think you could still be self-judgmental. You know, you beat up on yourself for things that you think you did wrong. However, sacred plants have always seemed to be in our history that for the exploration into the connections and getting out of this ego space or the individual and looking at the whole and being able to see things in a much larger way. What did you notice when you first began? What were some of the things that occurred to you as you were exploring that space and stillness? Or was it
Well,
still?
I
Your
just,
mind just racing?
no, I think I started to be able to maybe think critically, and appreciate my individuality and not being concerned about, uh, you know, peer pressure or conforming. Uh,
Hmm.
I at that point I began to really try to find, what it was that I, could excel at, or what I really enjoyed. And so I kind of shifted it, and it led me actually then to shift away from drugs, and
Hmm.
because I just,
You can enter by storm,
yeah.
right? Which is what that does. You still got to go in the front door without any accoutrements.
Yeah. So I got connected, I was going to a junior college, and I fell in love with the studies I was doing there. They were, and I enjoyed the teachers. I just started to be more respectful of my surroundings. And I also identified what my, I think at that point, what my career was going to be. I identified forestry as something I was really interested in. It had a magical aspect to it. I read The Hobbit, during that period. So I mean, I started really envisioning myself um, uh, being able to connect with the biosphere and
Sure. And there's no better place to do that than in
yeah.
nature and having a job that puts you in nature. Wow.
Yeah. So I kind of pursued that interest in forestry, and at the same time, then because I was doing that, I was not following along with anyone else. I was just
Mhm.
pursuing something that felt right for me, that I really enjoyed, and that I could get great pleasure from. So
You
that's,
made a point. You made a statement, right? Instead of you thought, it felt right to you.
mhm.
You know, I've found this to be true, and maybe you can corroborate. We can't think our way through a system built on vibration. We have to sense and feel our way through it.
Yeah.
How did you learn that, or was it just something that just seemed to happen naturally? Did you have a distinction between how you were thinking and feeling and seeing things in the outer world and what was going on inside of you?
Well, again, I think I'm going to attribute it to my grandmother, just awakening that intuitive aspect of myself, and
Mhm.
by looking at the oneness and the universality, I just started to allow my intuition to be more of a guiding force in my decision making, as far as things that were important to me.
Mhm.
So that's what happened there.
What do
And
you see in others? Do you see that this is more the anomaly than or the rare case than the norm today still?
well, I think that the people that I encounter on a daily basis and that I'm hanging around with and enjoying, they're all. I mean, okay, so let me. So what ended up
Well, yeah,
happening?
birds of a feather flock together, right? I'm talking about how do you see things in the larger perspective,
Well,
and you can observe from that place, right? And
well,
see these.
I think that the world is pretty much locked into certain patterns of thought that
Mhm.
that extinguish or dampen intuition, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do
And
you see that changing, since we've come through this, mm, I'll call it a challenged period where we were uh, obsessive on self-hygiene and being sequestrated, and when you're alone, what are you going to do? Eventually, you're going to self-examine. Did you see that activity taking place? Did it happen for you? Because we were all separated, whether we were masked or not, or vaccine, or that's a completely different story. On a whole, we had the opportunity to sit still for a little bit, self-examine. What do you see that came out of that so far?
of this recent period you're talking
Mhm.
about? Well, I
'Cause it was
think,
a global
yeah,
shift, nothing like we've had yet.
yeah. I think there's some growing skepticism and unrest and uh, a more realistic idea of trust and what's trustworthy.
Mhm.
I think, but I'm still not 100% sure how far what kind of progress has been made in that regard. And I think it needs to go a lot further than it is as far as you know on being able to uh, determine what's trustworthy and what's not.
Mhm. Well,
And
for decades, Howard Bloom make a point of this in the Lucifer Principle. There's been a few people who've told lies and managed populations by doing so through controlling the media stream and repeating these lies until everybody believes them to be true. Now we're at the point with the internet and this new ability to have a bit more, not just critical thinking, but gut feeling. It's like that doesn't feel right anymore. And I'm going to speak up because it doesn't.
yeah,
Do you see that happening more?
I do, but I think even the internet is being controlled. So I mean, so
There's
I,
always, those
I think that
who like to manage things, but that doesn't mean that there's no wiggle room in
oh,
that.
there is wiggle room, but it would be a lot further along if there wasn't these controls
Sure.
on
Well,
that.
I mean, seriously, let's look at the history of humankind. We have millennia of false belief systems, right? There's a lot of people that still believe, woman was created from man. And now they're still subservient because of that. Well, this is a patriarchal system that was set up millennia ago. And that's just now being flushed out to, oh, this really, it just doesn't make sense anymore, especially with the science that we have now.
Right, right.
It does more, quantum physics does more to prove the Vedantic philosophy than anything else to date, which I find just phenomenal. It's like we are in the times of the apocalypse, and it doesn't mean the catastrophic end of the earth. It
Right,
means the uncovering of knowledge.
right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And yet, how many people do you think you could ask what that word means and they would know?
What word?
Apocalypse.
I'm not 100% sure what that means.
It's a Greek word, and
Okay.
it means uncovering knowledge.
Oh,
This is
uncovering
what
knowledge.
the book of Revelation was called, the apocalypse. It means
Okay,
revelation.
okay.
And yet, I would venture to say at least perhaps 8, maybe 9 out of 10 people, you ask them what apocalypse means, and they say, oh, the catastrophic end of the world.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Total opposite of what it means. Now,
Right.
that doesn't mean that through the uncovering of knowledge that some systems won't decay
Yeah.
as a
Right.
result, but those are man-made systems. How do we find the universal systems you were talking about earlier? What are the keys to that? And what did you recognize as indicators of this universal experience that's available?
Well, I'm gonna jump into this, and you might pull me back or if you want to, but so
Yeah, I'm good with jumping off precipices. We
okay,
got wings.
okay, so I'm trained, technically trained as an Austrian economist, which is out of the tradition of classical liberalism, which recognizes that humans are subjective. Okay,
Hmm.
so the methodology then, appropriate methodology, appropriate scientific methodology for economics is subjectivism because humans are subjective.
Right.
So what happened then, as an Austrian economist, I also am a person who believes in the harmony of science and religion. So not people all of that tradition have advanced or thought in that regard. So what happened?
Doesn't that make sense, though?
No, it makes
If
perfect
truth ought to validate each other in that.
right. That's true. So it's not a hard thing to understand if you understand it.
Right.
So what happens is because
If you're not too subjective, right?
yeah. So what happened is I had a dream. I For some reason this period in my life I don't usually have a period tablet and a pencil next to my bed on a
Hmm.
night. But for some reason during this period, I had the intuition to put pencil and paper on by your nightstand. So I had this dream, middle of the night, I wake up with this image in my mind. And I know myself well enough to know I don't ever remember my dreams. So I thought, well, I better write this down. So
Hmm.
I wrote down what I thought I had in this dream, okay? And then I went back to sleep. And then when I woke up in the morning, all I remembered is I had a dream and then I wrote it down. I didn't remember what it was. And I looked at it and it was an image, okay? And that image is what is the foundation of the divine economy theory.
Hmm.
And so
That what's on the front cover?
well, I there's
Yeah, which cover, right?
yeah. It's on the
Okay.
front
But,
cover.
anyway,
So
please go on.
the image is really just a four-petaled flower,
Hmm.
and the center is called divine economy. The bottom petal is called human spirit. The top petal is called transformation. The petal to the left is called law, and the petal to the right is called order. And so that's what the image that I saw. And then because I was trained as an Austrian economist in the classical liberalism tradition, I
Hmm.
just thought that was a significant contribution to economics. So I just started to explore that and develop it with my training. And so what the reason I'm getting there is because you mentioned about the apocalypse, meaning that it's the release of knowledge.
Hmm.
And so in this model, basically what ends up happening as being developed, it's five dimensional, and the fourth dimension of it is an axis, okay, like that goes through the other parts, the three-dimensional part. So
Okay.
what that axis is, it's the axis of the nature and role of knowledge. And it, like an axis, it's spinning, and it can spin at infinite speeds. And what flows along that axis is knowledge. And so for as mankind advances, I mean, what causes mankind to advance is that axis moving because knowledge is growing,
Hmm.
and the speed and all that is affected is represented in that model. And so basically it's the flow of knowledge that causes the you know the economy to grow, or the economy
Right.
to work. And the economy only exists because humans exist. There's no economy outside of outside of humans. So
True.
it's connected to
Yeah, there's
that.
no legal tender amongst the animal kingdom.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, maybe we never know.
yeah. So that I don't know if how that worked in this
Well,
segment or not,
well,
but
I was asking, how does the universal view, right? When you began seeing that, where did that take you? And what I also, how it struck me in that softly, of course, in this, no, not aggression, the five aspects of holistic education: body, mind, spirit, planet, cosmos. And
Right.
so it seems that that spiral kind of brings all of those into the economic model, because there has to be, we've got to have some means of exchange
Mhm.
of, whether it's time, money, effort, stuff. There's this reciprocal
It is reciprocal.
energy exchange
Yeah.
of all kinds of different things, right? But do you see us moving from, because in the capitalist system, it's self-driven, right? It's the drive for acquisition, kind of like the Ferengi. How do you see that shifting?
Well, I I think what it is capital in that sense is uh, it's goods for the future is the way I describe capital.
Okay.
And so all humans they're you I don't know how far more advanced they are than animals, all animals, but they're in general they have a time perspective that's different than animals do. So they think about the future. That's all. I mean, they're trying to make be happier or
Right.
be better off, and that's something that's to be attained. So it's future, and
Mhm.
so uh, that's all it is. So
And other than basic needs for survival, you don't see wars in the animal kingdom, right?
yeah,
The acquisition of territory or resources or anything like that. It's the moment to moment.
yeah. So humans are just naturally that way. You can't remove the idea of capital from them because all that is goods for the future, and that's a
Mhm.
motivating force for people. So that it's part of them. There's no way, but it's misapplied and misunderstood in a negative way. But the positive thing is it exists and it always has existed and always will exist with
Sure.
humans. And
Right.
it's a good thing because that's how they work.
So is it possible that maybe from what I'm hearing you say, it's kind of a shift between the profit over people and planet, which is the old paradigm, to people and planet over profit. Doesn't do away with profit, it just redirects it, or how it's acquired.
Yeah, I
Does
mean,
that
but
make sense?
no matter what, how it's done, uh, the everything shifts when knowledge grows and
Mhm.
when knowledge shifts. So the reason we're in the position we're in is because we're kind of barbaric compared to what we will be in the future. And the reason is because we don't know what we're going to know in the future. But
Mhm.
what we can know is we can become better always, and we do become better always. And that education process, uh, it, okay, so humans they are seekers after truth. That's what I mean. They're different from animals. They're
Mhm.
seekers after truth. So they're always trying to learn. You know, if the
The
world
truth's
is
often subjective, though. It depends on the moment and what their perspective of is.
oh right,
And perspectives manage perceptions.
right. So because it's subjective, they can only respond and think and uh, relative to what they know and experience.
Hmm.
That's the subjective aspect of it. But if they're put in a world where they're bombarded with negative things, then their subjective thoughts and actions are going to reflect that. So as mankind advances, they're less likely to have subjective experiences which make them make bad subjective choices.
Hmm. Now, do you
So
find that's the difference in and I'm just throwing this out, do you find that that's relative within the competition versus collaborative model? And I don't want to say versus, but just in the distinction between the two.
Well, the ideal, the way the world works, and as far as the economy is concerned, is through voluntary social cooperation. When if that's happening, then it's working. You know, as far as the
Well, that's
competition,
the liberalism, but the current, no, you got to pay your dues, you got to do, certain things you must do, which seems a bit more aggressive than is necessary.
yeah, yeah, it is aggressive. It's basically a denial of the value of people being subjective.
Hmm.
They're being controlled because they think that they can make decisions for people better than the people themselves.
Sure.
So that's it's a top down kind of a world instead of a bottom up type of world.
So do you find moral subjectivity impacting the law more often than not?
Well, I think that
Or is that, I'm not sure if that's a fair question or not, because
oh,
that may be something you haven't really looked at.
no, I think law in this day and age is uh, it's gone away from codified law that's divine, and it's gone towards subjective law, which is man-made.
Hmm.
So I have this one diagram in one of my books. It shows. So if you have a situation where this is where you are in the world, and if to the left is bad, if this is good laws, this is this is when the laws are bad. Mankind is decreasing when the laws are bad. So
Hmm.
good laws are still, you think, well, that's great, that's good law, but you can advance on that. You can go to divine laws. So a divine laws, the world, mankind is further advanced. Good laws, they're here. Bad laws, they're there. So uh,
Right.
and we're a lot of times we're kind of in a mixed situation, but where you have some good laws and you have a lot of bad laws, which is probably where we are now.
Well, the reason I ask that is I'm also part of a global peace movement called Live and Let Live.
Okay,
And we have two principles, a moral and a legal. The moral is be an excellent human, and there's aspirations that we promote. And then the legal is don't aggress. And long term, our goal is to calibrate the law to remove aggression.
right,
Now, that's a tall order, and it's going to take some devoted people to do so. Yet, I don't know that we can move ahead until we all realize we need to do that in order to have real freedom and peace.
right. True. That's true.
How do you see the economic model shifting towards something that's more inclusive and serves all, or at least the majority, as opposed to the few that it currently does?
Well, um, the thing is, um, when I had a thought
Grab it, come back.
there.
Well, when you're on the moon, there's a lot of thoughtmosphere to deal with. And even though we've got a bird's eye view, sometimes it's hard to land.
I was thinking ahead of what you said, and I didn't hear what you said. I apologize.
Oh, well, then continue with what you were thinking. We'll catch up.
Okay. Uh, the thing is with the economy, the way it works is that, um, and again, it's along the lines of the harmony of science and religion.
Mhm.
They're complementary, and so you the what basically is the world is now. It's in a state of trusting the state. Okay, that there is an entity out there that's taking care of things,
Mhm.
including the economy. And but the reality is and the divine economy model really emphasizes and explores this. It's trust in God, because God is the one that created humans. He created them in his image, and a providential gift that was part of that creation is the economy. And now, and the way that's understood in economic terms is economic equilibrium. The concept of economic equilibrium. If something is out of balance, the tendency is to bring it back into balance. No matter where it is, it's always going to be able. What is the power of doing that? You know, that is part of God's providence. So it exists.
Doesn't nature work the same way?
Nature works the same.
Of course, nature is part of,
God's creation.
I hear we've used God for so long to put a label on something we have no comprehension of.
Right.
And yet there's this notion of, with quantum physics, especially the quantum sciences, of energy, that there's no matter, there's no material, it's all vibrating strings, for instance, and it's just collective, condensed energy that changes form depending on the frequency and the configuration, including our bodies. And yet, even with our bodies, this universal aspect, we're all part of the earth. Where do we get our nutrition from? Everything, every cell in our body comes from the earth. So we're truly children of her, because maybe even more so, because we're intimately connected from the nourishment that we get, and we don't really recognize that. Would that be something that fits into this, the universal, the divine economy, and the balance of that, in having the care and concern for all, as opposed to, and I realize this doesn't exist in the world right now. We have skirmishes, we have things, we've got a lot of horrific, abhorrent behavior happening, and yet it's getting less and less. Do you see this as part of that balance as we get smarter and maybe a little more intelligent about how things might evolve, and the understanding of navigating what may have been conflict instead of just miscommunication? And of course, a lot of the fear and of lack of control and wanting control, so of resources and things like that, make people do ridiculous things.
Well, when I was talking about providence, I think it's also another word for that is a gift. It's a gift, and when to take advantage of that gift, it has to be allowed to be appreciated. Okay, so what basically, so the economy, which has this economic equilibrium at its heart, okay, it's a gift, and so what does it do? I mean, if you're given a gift, it's something that enriches you, right?
Sure.
So what?
Well, sometimes traumatic experiences are gifts in review.
Yeah. Okay. So we learn from that. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's part of the process.
This gift has the potential of doing many things, and so what I'm saying is the economy is so important and so vital for the human experience. And this economy is what leads to ethics. It's what leads to justice. If you don't allow that gift to work, to benefit, if you don't allow yourself to benefit from that gift, sure, the ethics is not going to be there.
Oh, absolutely.
The justice is not going to be there.
No.
So that's the beauty of acknowledging that gift and letting it express itself, so that humans become more moral or ethical, and so that humans become more just.
Hmm.
Okay, so
What is morality really?
yeah,
That's about as subjective as you can get, depending on where you're living in the world.
yeah,
However, there is that universality of care and concern for one another. All we really want to do, in my opinion, our core desire is simply to, like you're saying, to have that gift of loving and being loved. And we've not admitted that to ourselves. We often fight it instead. In this fight to find balance now going into the new normal and beyond and looking at the future and what seems to be percolating, what do you see as a way for this balanced economy to emerge in something that changes the global concept of economy? Because it sounds like that's really what it would do over time.
right.
How
Well,
do you see
it
that
it,
evolving?
it does a couple of things. It breaks down some of the barriers that are there right now. Just
Such as,
the concept of the divine economy.
mhm,
It so there's resistance because of indoctrinations against this idea. So, like for
mhm.
instance, there's academic indoctrination where if it's not from an academic source, if it didn't come from
It's
a
not
university,
peer reviewed. It's not
right?
right.
So that's an indoctrination that goes out the window because this doesn't come from there. Okay, and another one is atheism. There's a lot of atheism in the world. Okay, and so and in a sense, just like any,
And atheism may not be a bad thing. It's just a not belief in a God that has been presented, which seems to be so convoluted.
right, right. I mean, so you can question and search and try to find answers and things like that, but to deny the idea that there is such a thing as a divine economy simply because I'm an atheist, that kind of goes out the window. Yeah, because this is of value apart from that. And another one is the idea of statism. So that everybody has this belief that that you need someone or something to uh, make decisions for you.
Manage everything.
Yeah, and so that is also an indoctrination that goes out the window with the divine economy theory.
But
So
that
that,
doesn't eliminate the need for systems, right? Because we do have,
but they're voluntary
well, and we don't, even
and
the
of
systems
course,
that we have, we don't consider how the systems are all integrated into other systems, let alone looking at a global holistic system of how things work together in harmony. We haven't seen that because we've just been to the place now where, as a global village, we were shut down. So that rubber band got stretched. Now it's snapping back together, and we're all going, oh, okay, how do we learn to get along? Because this doesn't work. So
yeah.
how do you see, how does the divine economy answer that question? How do we
Well,
learn to get along better as a result?
again, I think that the core basis of it is what causes everybody to get along, and that is recognizing that humans are subjective. So you can't make a decision for me because you don't know, you have not walked in my shoes.
Right.
So only one who can. So the reason I think one of the rational thoughts that people have, why should that person not make their own decision, is because they think that that person has flaws. They're ignorant. They don't know what's good for them. So so the
Subjective on very limited information
right.
and projections.
But what prevents that from happening is the freedom for people to learn, so
Mhm.
that knowledge should be flowing.
Be curious is what I hear you saying.
Yeah. but and also and to be in a world where that knowledge comes to them without, and if they seek it, they find it, you know.
Sure. Well, that's kind of mandatory, isn't it? You knock, seek, and ask, and it'll be provided. And it works. I'm sitting here as an example, and I'm sure you are too. We've tested that. How do we get others to test that, to recognize that, yeah, that's a way. Be curious, ask questions, ask critical questions. Don't be afraid of asking them, because if you're after truth, there's protection in that.
Right, right, right. Well, I was just going to give this example of what happens when there's like purity of heart. So
Mhm.
there was an individual in Uganda who had just started a free market, liberty based um, think tank, and he encountered this divine economy model book. Okay,
Mm.
and he loved it, and he's starting to distribute it amongst his friends and stuff there. And so it's growing like wildfire in Uganda, and now it's spreading around in other think tanks that are springing up all over Africa right now.
Mhm.
There's a
Well,
lot
and
of
you know, what is it? I think it's 90% of Africans make less than $1 a day.
and
To
they're
a
oppressed.
first world citizen, that just sounds insane.
And that continent is rich in resources.
Hmm.
It's all being extorted from them,
Exploited.
exploited. And so what's happening is the divine economy model is educating people about who they are as individuals and how they can be uh,
Supported as
how
such.
the economy works
Yeah.
in reality, how it really works. And so then they can start, and so they're beginning to uh, they're really excited about what's going on
Sure.
and developing cooperative endeavors. And so that's an example of
Well, and even models, regardless of what they are, how well they sound, how sound they may be,
right,
there's still the application to
right.
determine, okay, this works, or we need to adjust, or things like this. And so these pockets of activity,
Mhm.
what do you find that they're doing? What kind of feedback you're getting as to what's working, what's not working, what needs improvement, or just the general navigation through it? What seems to be the challenges they face and the solutions that they find?
Well, first thing happens is they have this tremendous confirmation that of their power, okay, of
Mhm.
their ability to make a difference, and it then becomes an entrepreneurial opportunity for them,
Mhm.
and so and then if they have the ability then to talk to others, they start to come up with ideas that they can implement as whereas before they didn't really know about how the economy worked. Now they know how the economy works. Do they have the resources to do it? Well, maybe they don't. So then but other people are doing the same thing. So they're
Okay,
now
so
working on getting those resources, and they're directing it towards things that are making improvement in the people around themselves.
mhm.
Yeah.
So how to on a practical, pragmatic, nuts and bolts in your face kind of environment, what can we see of how this works? What are the intricacies of how it is implemented?
One of the big things is they're basically having the strength to have a voice demanding property rights, and defending property rights, giving women property rights, put having markets that are not invaded by bureaucrats. They're really starting to uh, have the courage and the strength and the knowledge to create to build and create this strong foundation of property rights. That they have sovereignty over the things that they do, and those who are coming from outside and trying to extract their wealth, they're opposing that. So so basically
So kind of what the bureaucrats do, they're taking a cut for management of the scenario when they're really not doing anything, and it's the people that are operating amongst
and people
themselves.
know enough to make that obviously obvious and expose those that kind of approach, to expose
Mhm.
bureaucrats as really, you're not doing anything except taking this wealth.
Oh
And
yeah, and there's all kinds of charges, whether it be and I'm not sure what's happening in Africa, but I know, like in the States, there's all kinds of fees just to do business. There's
right,
all kinds of hoops to jump through, and if you don't and you get caught, there's
right,
stiff fines or jail time,
yeah.
depending.
And
Uh,
so
that seems over aggressive to me.
it is definitely. But when I started this, I said, talking about the pure in heart, and here's the reason it's pure in heart is in Uganda, where this is all happening, in other parts of Africa, but in this heart of this individual, there was no prejudice against the idea of a divine economy. So in the United States, the idea of divine economy, it hits the atheists, it hits the academias, it hits the statists. They're afraid of it, or they ignore it. They like, oh, that sounds bizarre, so
Right.
they don't explore it.
Well,
So
yeah,
they
and things we don't know or don't understand, we put on the shelf or deny or destroy or, all those kinds of things that don't allow it to emerge at all.
they deprive themselves of this new economic technology and new economic model and new economic theory because of their initial prejudice about it. Whereas in Uganda, where the culture there was, open to idea that the economy is divine, and so they didn't have any problem with it. So then they learned about it, and now they're able to use it. And so I think right now, if I was to make a prediction, I think Africa is going to be the continent where the divine economy theory and the divine economy, the fruits, the initial fruits of the divine economy are going to show up.
And it would seem, part of where I come from is if we're going to call ourselves an advanced civilization, then we need to take care of everyone. So what do we need to do first? We need to take care of those in the worst conditions.
Yeah, right.
So why wouldn't Africa then be, the optimal choice? Because we know, well, we don't know because we don't hear a lot of it because the media is marginalized. So we don't know, right? This is what you were talking about earlier. Yeah, fat, dumb, and happy, right? No, they can't know about that. If they don't know, then they can't do anything about it. And there's been many organizations, people, places, and things that are now filtering into the internet and having all of this access to information that we never used to. So even though the mainstream media is still under management of what, 7 or 8 corporations or something like that, the internet's pretty much free and you can find the information if you look for it. It's not banned.
Mhm.
Right? There's a lot of talks about how this and that's been censored or banned and think, well, sometimes things are done or you do it in a way that even though you're trying to do the right thing, it negatively affects um, the operational capacity of it. And nobody wants to, have riots or civil war or something like this. We've been through all that. We don't need to go back there. So what is coming up that would be an evolution in a revolutionary way that shifts us into at least exploring something new and being able to take care of one another. Is that even possible? And do you think and if so, do you think it could happen in a generation or two, or is it going to be next century?
Well, I think there's the pushback, the resistance to, like, okay, so I'm going to speak in terms of divine economy theory because I really do understand and believe and know that the divine economy theory,
And I've been playing devil's advocate
something
on
of
purpose, right?
value here, that when the pushback from those, from whoever, whether it's the academics, the atheists, the statists, uh, they can push. That's their initial response. But the divine economy theory is not going anywhere, and it cannot be refuted. So basically, their exposure to it, every time they're exposed to it, their resistance gets lower and lower. Their initial one was resistant, but it's not going anywhere, and it can't be refuted. So they're going to continue to see it. So they're going to keep it get weakened and weakened over time.
Right.
So that's one thing, and I think the no. So, anyways, that's one of
Obvious question of how's the message delivered? Because
that's good.
it doesn't really matter what the message is, it's how it's delivered as to how it's going to be received. And there are so
Right,
many different perspectives, subjective as they may be, that need to be spoken to in their language so that it's the conversion rate's higher, right?
right. Well,
How do you see that happening?
well, uh, something like this, your show, is an example. It's reaching an audience that wasn't reached before, so that's good. I have another thing coming up, a 5 series podcast coming up. So, it, it's I'm not an expert in internet, and I'm not an expert in marketing. I continually, post things, and it's such a small audience. If my audience was larger, it would be a lot more significant impact on the world. Uh, and I wish I was better at it, and I'm always trying. And I think help from people that like, for instance, in Uganda there was this one guy, and he's taken it to so many people, and there's 4 or 5 others that are doing the same thing now, in addition to him. And now there's a new guy that's just come onto the scene, and he's doing some phenomenal things. So that's what would. Here's my thought is, what I'm doing is I'm building a network of men and women who spread the knowledge of the divine economy theory. I can't do it myself. I mean, I can, but I'm not that skilled at it. But as more and more people who are enthusiastic and understand it and love it.
Like Derek Sivers says, you need to find your first follower, and your guy in Uganda may be it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And now there's more, and so I'm building. My goal is to build a network of individuals who spread it, not just me. And then it'll, when it gets to a certain threshold, it'll be significant. Right now, it's not significant, but it should be, and it will be.
And it would seem that when you find the way in which to share that lands best, that momentum would increase. And I know, for me, there wasn't any listening for 45 years in what I knew and what I was able to share. And so I walked around with this W on my forehead, and I wore my weird flag high. Right? So you still have
You
fun.
know what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm still working on articulating, how do you express to people, you understand it when I say we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware, right?
Right.
That's
Oh,
pretty,
beautiful. Yeah, that's
right?
beautiful. Yeah.
However, unless you have the experience or a direct experience or understanding or the intellect to comprehend that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. It's just going to go right over your head and you're going to be like, what?
In here and out there.
Yeah. So in the different ears that are available, this is where that sense occurs, right? The thinking can be set aside, the listening
Oh,
without belief system. Hard to do.
mhm,
Hard to recognize when you're listening to something and something comes up as a red flag, let's say.
red flag.
It may or may not be true, but it's there because of your programming. And you
Uh,
need to look at that because you're not seeing it from an empty place. There's
right.
still prejudice involved. There's bias.
Mm,
And most of us are looking for confirmation bias.
mm, mm, mm. True.
So how do you find that challenge being or giving you the gift of being able to articulate it in ways that touch?
Wow.
those-
Well, that's so good. And
So how do you find ways to articulate that? What do you find touches people most when you're talking about economics? Because it's usually something, even though we deal with it on a daily moment-to-moment basis sometimes, it's the last thing that we really want to think about as a global economy. How many shipping containers are going around the world right now? It's an indicator of what our economy is. So how do you touch, what do you find touches people the most and gets them to listen deeper
wow,
to the prospects of a divine economy?
wow. That's such a beautiful question. And that's kind of reorienting my mind as we're talking. And,
We're having an apocalyptic moment.
I've been approaching it probably maybe a little aggressively because I'm assuming that people are irritated and tired and disgusted with statism.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't even know what statism is, uh, but but being
Can you define it real quick for those that may not?
okay, it's basically the thought that uh, that someone else can can take care of things better than you can for yourself.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's
and,
pretty succinct.
yeah,
So in that finding, please.
and so I try to uh, approach it as as exposing that as not being true, and but I don't think I don't after hearing what you were saying, it doesn't feel like it's coming from my heart. So I have to readjust how I'm delivering the initial kind of uh,
That's wonderful. You feel vulnerable enough to share that. Thank
intriguing,
you.
make
And
it intriguing.
it's wonderful that you had that and acknowledge that you got a little different thing now that
Yeah, definitely,
it's
definitely.
like another layer of making it better.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
doesn't the other way does not seem kind. Yeah,
Well, one of the things I learned from this world and others is that we can't push or pull energy, right?
okay,
Cause and effect.
right,
Can't can't fix things with the same thinking that caused the problems to begin with. We've got
right.
to shift, right? Does that the curious, the like Rilke says, ask the questions, let life answer them. Because we want to answer the questions that we have with the knowledge that we think we have. We wouldn't be asking the questions if we had the knowledge to solve it to begin with. So we're seeking something new. So in order to find that, that's where that pause button, the question, and then just sitting. It's like uncomfortable silence in a conversation, right? Where you ask a question and you just shut up. Especially in sales, you ask a question, you shut up. First person that speaks loses. That's the competitive world, right?
Okay.
Now, in the collaborative world, that pause becomes more comfortable because you're accessing more simply by putting it on pause. You're giving your mind, body, spirit a chance to reflect and acquire and deliver as it was designed to do, in my perspective.
Oh, very good.
And I don't think that's a real subjective view because there are too many people that echo that experience today, which is kind of cool, I think, especially in the younger crowd. There's statistics for the show, for example.
Okay.
70% of our audience is under 44.
Wow.
That says something.
Yeah.
Now, if we can share wisdom from old guys like you and I, right, to the new ones in a way so that they can have at least more things to consider. Because if you don't know what you can consider, it's hard to consider it, even if you are curious enough to inquire. That kind of information still may not be available until you have an experience of something that gives you, oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
And we have to have the ability to not be self-deprecating because of that, which we tend to be. 70,000 thoughts a day, probably 3/4 of them are self-deprecating instead of manage them. Now, in a divine economy, it would seem that there would be less constraints in the manner of the energetic flow of activity and interaction with each other, so that overall, for lack of a better, thought-atmospheric constraint would be lessened. Is
Yeah.
that, am I on target with that?
Yeah. So that's kind of, I was going to transition then into the microeconomic aspect of it. So we were talking about the broad picture,
Right.
but the micro level is that really the source of value is the appearance of virtues. So whatever it is you're producing, if you're producing something and it has a virtue, that's what people want. They don't care about the thing. They want the virtue that the thing has, you know.
Right.
And so when in the economy, one of the things that uh, how it benefits every individual, and then as a result benefits every other individual, but how it benefits specifically an individual is that they see the economy basically in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
In
So
terms
what I hear you saying
of,
is like a pebble in the pond, right? That reception is the pebble, and the ripples go out through the community as a
right,
result.
right. So it changes perspective on what you're doing in the economy. You're basically you're producing things that have virtues. I mean, that have
Mm-hmm.
the have the
So
attraction virtues, and
would
you're
manufacturing, so you're talking about producing, would manufacturing, distribution, services, things like that, would that change all that much as far as what's being produced or available?
to some extent it would, but the understanding of what it is that you're producing definitely changes.
Mm-hmm.
You're not producing that thing, you're producing the virtue that that thing possesses. So you're seeing the world differently. You're
Right.
seeing the world in terms of virtues, and you're seeing the qualities that of all the steps that go along to make that
Sure.
thing. The people that are in it, the
And the
research.
virtue is an emotional, right? It's just a warm fuzzy, right? And all of our, I can't say all, I'd be a bit presumptuous. Most of our buying choices are emotional ones.
Right.
If
That's
it feels better,
right,
it
right.
gives more virtue that
That's what
there's
they're after. That's
others involved that are doing good things in the world, then you surely would want to support that more than something that's destroying the environment or, affects the health of others.
so for millennia, economists have been trying to figure out value. The divine economy found it. The value is the name of God or the virtue. That's where value is for anything. For all humans, they value that.
Hmm.
There's a plethora of virtues:
Right.
beauty, power, strength, might, wisdom, truth. They're
Right.
all
Well,
there.
today, God could be seen as the giver of data, right?
So
And
anyway,
that's
that's how the world then transforms in that way too, because now not only do they see in the big picture that that knowledge flows, that we're seekers after truth, but then also then we know where value comes from, and so we're by nature we're active in the economy. I mean, because we live and breathe it.
mhm,
Now we know what we're supposed to be doing. We're
right.
either we're
We're active in it rather than just consumers of it.
yeah, right.
And I think that's the shift that really is in process
Mhm.
because we're
Yeah,
realizing that
right,
this consumer society is damaging to everyone.
right.
Super. Bruce, this has been wonderful. Can you give us a parting gift? Right? On a daily basis, I guess, how would you suggest having this notion of a divine economy in one's consciousness could help them on a daily basis?
Well, I think it's a promise. I mean, the all from whatever tradition a person's coming from. If it's a religious tradition, there's the promise, that something's going to be beautiful in the future. The kingdom of God on earth or whatever.
Mhm.
And so there's the promise that the world will be a different world, one that we can't even imagine. Some people think it's going to be somewhere else, but there's no. I mean, that's just an interpretation. It could happen right here
World changes because you see it differently.
and just be different. Yeah, and so the what I would like to suggest is that uh, if by looking and learning the divine economy theory, you actually get to see the human potential and the potential of human civilization, and see it positively as coming about, and you can see it right in front of you. The way the model shows, you can see it unfold right in front of you. And so, and it's no different than the traditions of the past that were in that same line of classical liberalism. It's just a continuation of that, but with something more specific, and it'll inspire people to
Hmm,
to to learn the divine economy thought. It'll change their perspective on the world.
very good. So the circle will be unbroken, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, we see circle on
Oh,
two-dimensional space, and
definitely,
when you
definitely.
look at the side, you can see that circle is made up of a bunch of different spirals. And as we spiral through space, um, sharing with each other and meeting each other and getting to know other things that we can do that help us to grow and be our best. And I think that's and to love and be loved, right? That's
Right.
the whole objective. So
Well,
Bruce, thanks so much for being with us today, and
I felt love from
blessings to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I felt your love very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And namaste and in la catch. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm I'm Zen Benefiel. I'm your host, and I'll see you next time.